we're now in a situation where, I wrote a book 10 years ago called The New Normal. And I thought it was a fun title at the time. Now I can't stand it, post-pandemic. But what I wanted to describe is what will happen in a world where things like digital become normal. And that happened in the last decade. What I really hope that doesn't happen is that people post-pandemic just have this naive idea that we're going to just slip back to the old normal. As a matter of fact, I don't think the old normal exists anymore. I think we're going to get into a world that is constantly changing with more seismic shocks. Some of them will be technological, but it's biological, it's ecological, it's sociological, it's geopolitical. And I think what companies need to do is prepare for a world of constant change. And I think the fundamental problem there, Marshall, is that if I look at how companies are organized, how their governance is, they're really not capable today to actually deal with that never normal. Because what they do is they still hold on to some of those ideas and paradigms and concepts of the past that really don't apply anymore. So I think the fundamental thing that I hope post-pandemic is that we have an opportunity to rethink some of those mechanisms, some of those constructs, and re-equip companies with, I think, the tools they need to think about this post-pandemic never normal world.
Well said. And it actually leads me to a very interesting topic, because I think, Peter, there's something missing. Coming up, there is perhaps a correlation between empathy and how long time we live. Science show you some remarkable insight. And that's, I think, maybe the key to the question you asked, Peter, which leads me to the introduction of our next guest. His name is Jamil, with the most fantastic last name I've heard about, which is Saki. Jamil Saki is a professor of psychology at Stanford University and the director of the Stanford Social Neuroscience Lab, using tools from psychology and neuroscience. He and his colleagues examine how empathy works and how people can learn to empathize more efficiently. Now, his best-selling book, The War for Kindness, what a nice title, is all about how to build empathy, as he says, in a fractured world. Welcome, Jamil.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
It's such a pleasure. Do you know what? Both you and I have written a lot about empathy, and you're so much better at it than I am. I have to admit it. So I've been inspired, and here the truth is coming, right? Listen, I just want to ask you a question. We've never been as busy as now with technology playing a major role in our lives. 4 years ago, you said that we were experiencing an empathy shortage. A lot has happened since. What's the empathy status right now?
Yeah, well, first, let's get on the same page about what empathy is, which is an umbrella term for different ways that people connect with each other's emotions, including sharing what other people feel, kind of vicariously catching someone else's feelings, understanding what they feel, which is critical to management, and caring about what other people experience. Now, you're right, Martin, that there has been a decline in empathy from the 1970s until around 2010. An interesting question then is what happens now, as you're saying, we've gone through this, well, I like the term, Peter, that you were using earlier, this never normal time. So I think an interesting split occurs during times of disaster, for instance, between what people think, how people think others will behave and how they actually do. People often imagine that during disasters like the pandemic, people will really focus only on themselves, that social order will fall apart, that people will become very selfish. It turns out, though, that during times of disaster, empathy and kindness accelerate. And that's what we've seen over the last 2 years as well. The World Happiness Report was released in March and found that different kinds of acts of kindness, volunteering, charitable donation, and helping strangers all skyrocketed over the past 2 years compared to the years directly before the pandemic. Now, I think that one issue here is that people don't know this. People imagine that during difficult times, we need to focus on ourselves. And lots of managers and leaders think that they need to focus their people only on their individual contributions during times like this. Well, guess what? That loses out on what actually motivates people, which is their connections to one another.
You mentioned connections. How about connections in kind of the hybrid world? We've got some people there, some people online. What are your thoughts?
I think that one of the great losses of the pandemic has been what I call in-between times at work. I haven't seen personally a coffee machine at a workplace or a water cooler or anything like that in quite a while. I've seen many fewer of them than I used to. And those are the places at work where we typically make those little connections that actually turn out to matter enormously for our sense that we have a community at work, that we are supported. And that sense of support and community in turn facilitates my willingness to be creative, to be innovative, and to be a good colleague. Here's the thing though, when people connect in between times at work, they don't connect randomly. They often connect with people who are already like them. So for instance, if I was at a water cooler right now, I would want to talk about my beloved Boston Celtics who are about to lose in the NBA finals today. I'm just preparing myself psychologically, as you can tell. But so I would gravitate towards fellow basketball fans. That's all well and good. But in organizational life, it's important to connect not just with people who are like us, but with people who are different from us. I think that this hybrid world, to your question, Marshall, provides us with a novel opportunity to not have connections occur only accidentally, but to create community more intentionally. Whether that's spending a little bit of time on the front end of a meeting, checking in with everyone on your team as people, or creating meetings that are standalone to share and understand what people are going through as human beings. To create that community intentionally can actually, I think, in some ways be better than the community that happens accidentally when we're in person.
Shamil, I remember a story I experienced a couple of weeks ago where one person said to me that we are completely overworked today. And in the past, it was okay because we had a connection with each other. That connection meant that at 6 o'clock in the evening, people will step in and say, do you know what? I'm ready with my past work. I can go in and roll up my sleeves and help you to make it happen. But then he said, in our organization, more than 70% of all new staff are new. There's only 30%, which actually is the old guard. So no one had an interest in really rolling up their sleeves anymore. So he said to me, the reason why I'm stressed is because we have no empathy. And because we have no empathy, we don't help each other. Help me here to work around, what do you do in practically in situations like this?
So first of all, that person, his experience is backed up really robustly by data. So there was, there's been a series of surveys from Business Solver that have found that employees say about 90% of them say that they would be more loyal to an empathic company. And about 80% of them, to your point, Martin, say that they would work longer hours for an empathic organization. And research from some psychologists who studied 45 different organizations found that people who believe their company is more empathic, they work harder on their own tasks, but they're especially more likely, Martin, to engage in what I would refer to, I think you're talking about as extra role behaviors. These are things that go above and beyond the call of duty, either taking creative risks with their own work, or as you're saying, rolling up their sleeves at 6 p.m. to help a colleague. So you're exactly right. If our organizational lives crater with respect to empathy, they're going to crater with respect to productivity, innovation as well. And I think you're seeing that now. There was a survey of 1,000 people who left their jobs during the Great Resignation that found that more than 50% of them, about 54%, cited a lack of empathy and connection as part of the reason that they left. So that 70% of workers who started during the pandemic, if they don't feel connected, they probably won't stay very long either. So this gets me back, I think, to Marshall, to your excellent question, which is, well, how do we build community when we're sort of hybrid or remote? I think it's critical for the person, Martin, that you're talking about, to not just say, wow, 70% of my people started remotely, so they will never experience empathy. Well, that's giving up, right? I mean, there are many ways that we can establish empathy and community even while we're apart. And that varies depending on the type of organization you have, the level of seniority of your colleagues, and where everyone is coming from, time zones and so forth. But the important thing is that leaders are intentional about this and spend time, resources, and energy figuring out how to ensure that their people feel connected as people, because without that, their teams will not be as productive and probably won't be very long-lived.